Joining me now is Sajjan Kumar, who's a political analyst. We have author and analyst Aarti Jairath with us. We also have Mithali Nikore, economist and of Nikore and Associates. Thank you so much for joining us. To you first, Mithali, because budget is the flavor of this season. What are the top priorities? In fact, what should be the top priorities of Modi 3.0? What should be the economic, roadmap for this government? Because clearly it does not have the numbers that it expected. But of course, Narendra Modi is the Prime Minister for the third time. And, when I speak to ministers, there's only one thing that the Prime Minister is insisting ever since he took charge, that every work that you do needs to create jobs. So there needs to be an impetus on jobs. He's been focusing on Yuva Shakti. A lot of our consumer expenditure is driven by youth. So clearly there is a possibility that there could be some targeted schemes for youth. In fact, the BJP manifesto did talk about increasing the Ayushman Bharat cover to senior citizens, and also it talked about housing scheme. So clearly the priorities of the government are not unknown. But how are they going to fit all of that in this budget, especially with those reduced numbers? What do you think the government will be thinking when it comes to economic priorities right now?
Absolutely, Vasudha. I mean, the budget of each year, this is my 10th budget that I'm analyzing. And, in the last 10 years, what I found is that each year the government really reflects the priorities for economic growth in the budget speech. The top 5 or 10 announcements are always there in your budget speech. But when you look deep into the numbers, and when you look really into the ministry by ministry allocations and the schemes, there are few things I believe in this budget which will stand out. First is, as you rightly said, the focus on employment, right? We have an unemployment crisis which is characterized by a dual, sort of manifestation, where on one hand, industry is saying, we have the jobs, but we're not able to find, the skilled people to do those jobs. And on the other hand, we have youth, who have aspirations to only enter the knowledge economy and become white collar workers. So I think somewhere, by incentivizing factory work, by respecting factory work, by respecting blue collar jobs, by respecting, the gig economy, and providing more and more government supported social security for gig workers, these are certain measures that, the government could come in place. They already announced a lot of schemes around insurance, right? We have the Ayushman Bharat Yojana. I do expect schemes of that nature to get a boost and to get more of a hike. The second is around skill training, right? Because as you said, industry is looking for people, but if they cannot find, then that means that there's a skill gap and a skill mismatch. And for that, I do expect a recasted Skill India mission, because at this point in time, everyone understands that the Skill India mission is a very important measure, but it needs to be expanded and it needs to be, aligned more with industry expectations. So I do believe that when you're talking about youth, and when we're talking about the unemployment crisis, these two measures on social security on one hand,
right,
and on skill training on the other hand, very important.
Right. Let me get Aarti here. Aarti, the politics of this is very interesting, because we saw a very aggressive opposition in the first session during the oath taking. The highlight of that was also Rahul Gandhi becoming the LOP. But of course, in the all-party meeting yesterday, a host of issues were raised. How do you see the politics of this playing out in the budget, and government itself in some ways balancing state aspirations? Because the federal character of the country, in some ways has also become a point of contention under Modi's regime. So that's one thing that the government has been very defensive about. So, almost 3 states asking for special category status, of which 2 are the party's own allies, but the party's own allies are also sort of, in some ways toning down their aspirations of special categories, asking for special packages. How do you think all of this is going to play out when the government itself wants to expand its social security network, but also wants to focus on growth? How do you think the government is going to walk this tightrope?
Years, the government is really going to feel the pressure of numbers. 2 terms, it just was able to do anything it wanted because it had the numbers. But this is the first time that they are now going to have to do a lot of tightrope walking and balance, what it feels is right for, India's growth, to achieve that 2047 target of Viksit Bharat, and the demands that are coming in. I mean, whatever, there are, of course, demands from the opposition, But more key are the demands from its own allies. Yes, okay, even they may not give special category status, but they are all demanding special packages. And now there's a demand that is coming from Orissa as well. So Orissa is a state that is ruled by the BJP. Now, this means larger financial allocations to these states. And it's like a Pandora's box, once you open that, all kinds of demands are going to come from all kinds of states because all states need money today. So how is the government going to balance all this? We're going to have to watch this. And then, of course, there is an aggressive opposition on the other side, which has a whole host of issues to raise, from unemployment to Manipur to need to so on. It's going to be a very, very difficult session for the government. And I think the government is going to have to change its strategy, that strategy that it had for the last 10 years, where it just, steamrollered everybody and did what it wanted to. It's going to have to tone that down and show much more accommodation, much more communication, much more outreach to its allies and to the opposition if it wants a session that accomplishes some business for India's growth.
Right. Sajjan, there's something that I wanted to ask you. In the last few years, if the budget has something that was a constant, it was the Modi government's push for infrastructure. In fact, the capital expenditure has only increased. In fact, it was almost 3.47% of our GDP, 11.5 lakh crore last year. So tell us, when it comes to infrastructure, building these expressways, railway stations, redevelopment of railway stations, airports, this is something that the Modi government has focused a lot on. But at the same time, there are questions about, the quality of the infrastructure. I also believe that some of these aberrations may not really count as tsunami. But at the same time, there is also an insistence that the private investment is not increasing as it really must. So what do you think the government will do when it comes to this push towards infrastructure vis-a-vis, every government's political compulsion to also increase social security net? Do you think there'll be some balance that the government will find here?
Politics have always dominated the economy in India, and particularly in the budget. But they should be, as long as dominating, it's okay, but they should not be driving the economy. Now, here the question is, one part is of fiscal consolidation, which is important, but the other part primarily, as has been rightly pointed out before, is about the employment generation. And therein you see there is some sort of a consumption pattern is shrinking, and therefore that's a lot of worry. And primarily big infrastructural push that has been the USP of BJP government, not only at the central level, but also at the state level. You see, when BJP government comes, the kind of development model they bring is about building expressways and many other big infrastructures. Compared to that, wherein there is a gap, and that they should be filling, is about focusing more on the rural area. And when we see rural area, it should not just be about the organized farming or the big farmers who should be the beneficiary, because rural is not agrarian in per se. Majority of the rural area today is non-agrarian, and therefore it is that space which needs to be capitalized, and the focus on MSME should not just be confined to tier 2, tier 3 cities, but also the sort of enabling features, be it infrastructure, tax incentive, financial support, should be given to that sort of thing, wherein you see there are more and more avenues of employment generation at the rural sectors, and these little infrastructures are needed besides continuing the big ones. So that is why at this point of time, the political noise is a lot. We do see political issues dominating, particularly about the special status coming from two allies, and also that kind of creating a sort of domino effect in other areas. But I think we do not see much deviations from the interim budget, and that is why we do not expect more populist measures coming, even though elections are there. So that is why at this point of time, what we need is not just a kind of continuation of fiscal consolidation measure. And away from the populist measure, what is needed, some sort of consideration also for the middle class, because you need to create, not a big sort of a departure from the entry budget, but giving some sort of a feel-good sort of ambience, which is there, some tax consideration, etc. But primarily it is about the tapping into the potential of rural sectors. And by rural, I'm saying even the non-agrarian sectors of the rural areas, which is dominating now the rural spaces.
Right.